Have you ever wondered why some women don't need to say a word, yet haunt a man's mind years after they've gone? It's not a psychological game. It's a living meditation, an expression of individuation, not passive resignation, but a kind of acceptance that transcends logic. No final words, no dramatic ending. Just one morning he realizes she's no longer there. Not just physically, but her energy is gone, like the tide, quietly pulling away every trace. This is when longing begins. It's not for her body, not for control, for the space where he once felt seen, reflected, accepted, and now can never return. This disorientation doesn't come from what she did, but from what he lost. His emotional compass. She was once a landmark, a mirror, a symbol of peace amidst the chaos. And when she chooses silence, every voice inside his mind grows louder, questioning, screaming, regretting. But by then, she has become something untouchable. A woman who has passed through the layers of emotion, of anger, of pain, and arrived at a place of calm. So still it feels cold, not because she no longer loves, but because she now understands that love cannot save anyone. She no longer fights, no longer demands, because she has awakened. And in that state of awakening, her presence becomes so grounded, so deep, that it makes a man feel small, broken. Nothing is more terrifying to a man than being fully seen, especially when no one is trying to fix him anymore. Where she retreats into her own center to become whole, self-sufficient and free. In a world where noise is the weapon we use to drown out fear, silence becomes the highest form of inner power. Carl Jung once said, "What is not brought to consciousness comes back as fate." And when a man encounters the silence of a woman he once saw as an extension of himself, that fate arrives no longer as words, but as an aching emptiness that forces him to look within. It's not because she was more beautiful. It's not because she was more affectionate. It's because her silence wasn't an absence. It was a sacred space where a man is forced to confront the darkest parts of himself. In Jungian psychology, that darkness is known as the shadow, the place where we store everything we deny, reject, or try to forget. When a woman chooses silence as an act of emotional intelligence, she unknowingly holds up a mirror to the male ego. And what he sees is often not her, but himself, raw, confused, with nowhere to hide. A man is drawn into a woman's silence not simply because she says nothing, but because what she doesn't say echoes louder than anything he's ever heard. It's not a silence designed to manipulate. The first kind of silence that disorients a man is the silence of understanding. No reaction, no judgment, no chasing, just a quiet observation like a mirror reflecting his mind. This woman isn't angry. She doesn't storm off in resentment. She simply withdraws from the emotional battlefield. And in doing so, she leaves him face to face with the question, who am I when I'm no longer defined by her reaction? This is an earthquake for the ego. When external validation disappears, a man is forced to revisit the neglected parts of his psyche, where old wounds lie dormant beneath a mask of strength. The second silence is the silence of acceptance. The final, deepest silence is the silence of departure. But without turning her back, she withdraws, softly, like a spirit. There's a brutal truth not every man is ready to face. The women who haunt them the most are the ones who don't need them. And through that gateway, a man no longer sees his familiar reflection in her eyes. The questions that once defined his ego, am I good enough? How much does she need me? They begin to lose their power, because this woman is no longer playing the victim, nor is she the one chasing. She stands still like a mountain. What is she thinking? Does she still care? Has she really gone? But all the answers are swallowed by the silence. At that moment, the disorientation reaches its peak. And this is the turning point, where a man must face the most important choice of his life. To turn away and continue running from his own shadow, or to begin the journey inward, to begin listening, start learning how to love without needing to control, to learn how to exist beside a woman, without fixing her, without owning her, without defining her. She withdraws into herself like the ocean, will awaken in you the longing to become the man who is whole within himself. And it is that calm, that non-reactive, non-pleasing, non-angry state that makes a man feel more empty than rejection ever could. Not because they lack love, but because their love is no longer bound by the need to be loved in return. The silence of such a woman is not a pause between conversations. It is a gateway, a ritual, a test of the soul. In Jungian psychology, this woman has crossed a threshold. She has moved beyond the small self, the one craving external validation, and touched the eternal essence within. He feels pulled in, not by beauty, not by sweetness, but by a strange, wordless gravity. It's the kind of magnetism that comes from someone who has nothing to prove. She doesn't seek attention. She doesn't embellish herself. She doesn't manipulate with exhausting tactics. She simply is, and in that state of being, she becomes a mirror, unfiltered, undistorted, reflecting back exactly what a man tries hardest to hide. She doesn't to criticize, because her silence alone is enough to awaken the shadows within him. The suppressed wounds, the unspoken desires, the hidden insecurities, they all begin to rise to the surface. From that place, she no longer seeks answers outside of herself, because she has begun to hear the voice within. Because most have never been taught how to face themselves. They've been trained to pursue, to conquer, to control. But no one told them that one day they would stand before a woman, and none of that would work. He can be funny, successful, even handsome, and still be unable to move her, because her stillness is not swayed by appearances. When she chooses silence, not to escape, but to return to herself, he begins to long. No longer a longing to possess, but a longing to touch the depth of someone he once thought was simple. And that's what makes her invisible in a noisy world, yet more profoundly present than anyone else. When a man meets a woman like this, at first he doesn't understand what's happening. This is where most men lose their way. Starts asking himself, a woman who does not need you to be whole. Have you ever met a woman who didn't need saving? Not a damsel in distress waiting for a hero, but someone who walked with an inner strength that both intrigued and intimidated you. You might have felt an instant connection, a pull towards her quiet confidence. Yet at the same time, you might have noticed a certain distance, a stillness about her that seemed impenetrable. She doesn't need a hero. She needs a soul that can stand firmly in truth, even when that truth strips away every mask. The silent woman is not silent because she has nothing to say. Yeah, buddy, because she has already spoken through her actions, her eyes, her stillness. Every time she doesn't respond, it's a test. Every calm gaze is a quiet reminder I don't need to control. I've seen you, and I choose silence over noise so that you can finally hear yourself. In a healthy relationship, silence is not a weapon. It is a space where two souls can grow unbound, unattached. But for men who are unhealed, who've never been taught how to exist in uncertainty, a woman's silence becomes a maze with no exit. They try to break it with anger, with suspicion, with relentless questions. But the more they try to break it, the deeper they fall into it. Because the disorientation doesn't come from the woman. It comes from within the man himself, from the part of him he has never faced. She is simply the catalyst, steady mirror, not reacting from instinct. And that what forces him to confront the deepest parts of his being. It was as if she carried a depth of wisdom and experience that you couldn't quite reach. They don't beg or plead, they simply disappear and leave behind a void that nothing can replace. No new flings, no success, no temporary laughter can fill it. Because that emptiness isn't about the woman, it's about the man himself. It's the part of him he lost when he lacked the courage to see her as a soul, not a role. In Stoic philosophy, they say true freedom comes from the ability to let go of what is beyond one's control. And nothing is more beyond a man's control than a woman's emotions. But when a man learns not to control, but to respect, to observe, to walk beside, that is when he begins to develop true depth of being, and the woman. She remains silent, but within that silence she has undergone a rebirth. Is no longer pulled into other people's storms, no longer proving her worth, no longer seeking answers from the outside. She has touched her own darkness, faced her wounds, moved through the fear of abandonment. And because of that, she no longer needs to raise her voice to prove her presence. Her presence is enough to quiet a man, not because she is extraordinary, because her wholeness is something he's never encountered before. And in that stillness, a new longing begins to grow. Not a longing to possess, but a longing to understand, a longing to step into a world he once skimmed past, but never truly touched. As the days went by, you may have found yourself growing more and more fascinated by her. Her silence became a puzzle you wanted to solve, her calm demeanor a mystery you longed to unravel. Yet the more you tried to get closer, the more you sensed that she was holding something back. There were parts of her world that she wasn't letting you into. What would you? You might have started to feel a sense of unease, wondering what it was about her that you couldn't quite grasp. Was it her independence, her self-assurance, or perhaps her refusal to play the games of romance that you were used to? Whatever it was, you couldn't help but feel drawn to her, desperate to understand the allure of this silent, enigmatic woman. There's a moment in every man's life when the familiar landscape of his desires shifts. It's a subtle change, like the first tremor of an earthquake, and it occurs when he lays eyes on a woman who embodies a power he's never witnessed before. It's not the predictable softness of the femme fatale, nor the tempestuousness of the seductress. It's a force that emanates from her stillness, a silent, ancient energy that mirrors the depths of his own untamed soul. In those moments, when silence is no longer a pause, but a state of being, a man begins to feel the power of the sacred feminine, not the softness he's accustomed to, not the emotional outbursts so often associated with femininity, but a silent, ancient energy. Like moonlight on water, illuminating without possessing, present without imposing. This is the archetypal feminine, what Carl Jung called the anima, the soul of a woman within the psyche of a man. And when the anima awakens, she stirs in a man a primal longing, not to possess, but to understand. Not to control, but to touch depth. But the paradox is this: only the men who have made peace with their own darkness are capable of holding space for a woman like this. She doesn't need to be saved. It's no coincidence that the silent women leave the deepest marks in a man's memory. They don't create drama. A woman's silence can be a mystery to most men. It's a puzzle they try to solve. To truly understand a woman who has chosen silence, a man must willingly fall from the altar of his ego, and if he cannot bear to look, cannot stand in that reflection, he will turn away. The one learning to love still longs to be understood, held, chosen, but the awakened woman only longs to be free, and for others to be free too, even if that means leaving. In silence, just be. Be in the silence with her. Dance with the unknown. Because that's where the deepest understanding begins. Not when she speaks, but when you do. And it is then that she becomes an irreplaceable symbol. No longer a lover, no longer a memory, but a threshold, a lesson, a mystery a man cannot solve, because the answer was never in her, but in himself. But one day, when the shallow laughter around him no longer drowns out the inner echo, he will remember. Not because she was special, but because she was the only one who didn't need him to be himself. In her silence, there is forgiveness. Not spoken forgiveness, but the kind that transcends punishment. Forgiveness because she understands that what happened wasn't out of malice, but ignorance. From wounds men were never allowed to touch, and she does not stay to heal them. She leaves so he can begin the journey of healing himself, where performance, achievement, and power are the sacred trinity, and step into a land with no map. It means you've been invited to step into your own. But most men, they refuse the invitation. They'd rather chase the fantasy, scream into the silence, beg for a response, anything to avoid confronting the quiet truth within themselves. They'd rather be right, victorious, or even just busy, than still enough to listen to the wisdom that silence offers. For a woman who goes silent isn't just testing your love, she's challenging your whole worldview. She's daring you to sit with uncertainty, to be present in the unknown. And that's the ultimate seduction. Not the answer, but the invitation itself. The realm of raw emotion, unnamed impulses, fear of abandonment, the loss of control, and the absence of admiration. This woman is no longer speaking, not because she feels nothing, but because she has become dangerous in her calm, not dangerous in hostility, but in her capacity to stand alone, to no longer require anyone to validate her worth. She no longer loves like a girl, wildly, desperately. She doesn't cling like a shadow. She chooses stillness as a sacred right, a conscious act, not a reactive one, a return to her true self. And that is what makes her unreachable in the way she once was. Not because she built walls, but because she has dissolved. She no longer fits into the roles of lover beloved, the one to be saved. She has become an embodiment of the deep feminine, an archetype that a man can only approach by shedding his armor. Carl Jung called this the reconciliation between the anima and animus, the feminine within the man and the masculine within the woman. When neither lives in extremes, neither seeking conquest nor surrender, but finds peace within themselves, then their presence together becomes a sacred space, free from need, grounded in mutual being. But to reach that place, a man must fall. He must break down. He must see himself in the void her silence creates. There is no shortcut, no easy redemption. It's only one path, through the darkness, through the echoes of all the women who once screamed, once left, once forgave, and finally grew silent. But often the solution isn't what they want to hear. See, not every woman needs to be understood. Not every silence demands an explanation. But the modern man, he's wired differently. He believes every silence is a question waiting for an answer. Every pause is a problem needing a fix. He approaches a silent woman like a technician, trying to diagnose the machine instead of experiencing the poetry. He forgets she's a human being, not a household appliance. But not every man is ready to cross that threshold. She, the woman before him now, does none of those things. She no longer hopes he will understand. She simply is, a motionless mirror. This is the difference between a woman who is still learning how to love and a woman who has awakened. When a woman falls silent, it does not mean you've been shut out of her heart. So the next time a woman goes silent, don't panic, don't persuade, don't try to fix it. When a woman stops speaking, when she retreats into silence, many men assume she's defeated. They think it's a surrender, a giving up. But the truth is far more complex, far more powerful. For silence, when taken to its fullest depth, is no longer a weapon or a shield. It becomes the highest form of communication. There was a woman named Sarah. Everyone knew her as the loudest, most opinionated person in any room. But one day she stopped speaking. The silence remains unbroken, impervious to his efforts. It's as if the very essence of her being has shifted, leaving him grappling to connect with the person she's become. She has stepped into a realm where silence is golden, where presence is power, and where authenticity is the ultimate currency. He might find himself pulled between admiration and frustration, respect and resentment. The silence has stripped away the superficial layers, revealing the raw, unfiltered truth of their relationship. It's a truth he might not be ready to face, but facing it is the only way forward. In that space, she discovers a clarity that is often lost in the cacophony of communication. If he's willing to dive into the depths of his own being, he might emerge transformed, more authentic, more compassionate. But if he's not willing to do the work, the silence will continue to be a source of torment, a constant reminder of the disconnect within himself. She no longer feels the need to explain, to justify, to persuade. She has reached a place where her presence speaks volumes without a single word. You're no thick me. This is a place of deep inner knowing, a state of being that defies the need for articulation. At first, people thought it was a joke, a prank. But as days turned into weeks, the silence became deafening. Her friends were worried. He might feel a sense of loss, as though a part of their bond has been severed. The silence can be challenging, even threatening, because it confronts him with his own internal struggles. It mirrors back to him the parts of himself that have been neglected or ignored. Suddenly he feels the weight of his own thoughts, the hollowness of his own heart. The silence amplifies his emotions, forcing him to confront feelings he's been avoiding. It's as if the absence of her voice has created a vacuum that sucks in all the suppressed emotions he's been carrying. Her family was concerned, but Sarah seemed at peace. She would sit quietly, observing the world, a faint smile playing on her lips. People started to whisper. What had changed her? What had caused this sudden silence? And as the whispers grew, so did their judgments. Some said she'd gone crazy. Others said she was defeated, but Sarah knew something they didn't. She had found a strength that transcended sound, a power that lay dormant within her silence. You see, when a woman stops speaking, She leaves behind the chatter of expectations, the noise of judgments, the echoes of opinions. A man who loves such a woman often finds this silence unsettling. Might try to fill the silence with words, seeking to recreate the connection they once shared. But more often than not, these attempts are futile. In that confrontation lies the potential for growth for both of them. Ultimately, when a woman stops speaking, she no longer plays by the rules of the world. And remember, silence can be golden, but only if you have the ears to hear it. Thanks for watching. A man wants to know the exact moment when a woman loses interest in him. I'm going to tell you right now, that moment is when she decides to stay silent. I'm not talking about a polite silence. It's because she screamed too many times into the void. The girl who had been abandoned, who tried to be good just to be loved, who gave up her dreams to please others. That little girl once believed, if I'm good enough, kind enough, pretty enough, I'll be chosen. I'll be loved. Those eyes now carry the depth of someone who's been through hell and survived. She simply is herself, and that alone is different enough. She's no longer the woman who chases love. She's the one love chases. Not because she's playing games, but because her peace is magnetic. And so she walks, without looking back. If someone has the courage to walk beside her, they will. If not, she keeps walking. Because now, the goal is no longer to find someone. It's to never lose herself again. She no longer needs to raise her voice, because her presence is her voice. She walks away without explaining, without defending, without begging to be understood. Her silence speaks volumes. It says, I'm done trying to fit myself into your world. I'm done hoping you'd change. I'm done waiting for something that'll never be. There's a quiet dignity in her silence, a strength that comes from finally letting go. Don't mistake her silence for weakness. It's one of the most powerful moments in a woman's life. She no longer explains, because she knows those who truly want to understand will listen. It's not with ears, but with their heart. She no longer needs love to heal. But she's open to receiving love as a gift, not from lack, but from wholeness. In that state, she becomes a strange kind of light, not blinding, not flashy, but quiet, soft, and impossible to ignore. I'll be kept. But now, she no longer comforts that child with sweet promises. She looks into her eyes and says, we no longer need to be chosen, because we've chosen ourselves. She once loved with her whole heart, tried to understand with all her mind, and waited with her soul. But nothing was ever enough to make the other person truly see her. That silence didn't begin from strength, it began from a breaking point. A moment when something inside her whispered, enough. Not a quiet plea, but a command from the universe itself. She no longer needed anyone to reach for her. She no longer waited for someone to rescue her. She realized no one could do that but herself. So she turned inward, and the journey began. I'm talking about a silence born out of deep disappointment, maybe even despair. That silence screams volumes. ChatGPT. When a woman chooses silence, it's not because she's weak. She's leaving behind an old version of herself, the one who tolerated too much, who was afraid, who lived for others. She learns to listen to her emotions, without being ruled by them. She learns to say no without feeling guilty. She learns to walk away from conversations that make her shrink and seek out spaces where she can expand. She writes, she reads. She walks in the woods. She cries. She meditates. She watches the moon rise and realizes she too has cycles. Moments of fullness, of emptiness, of brilliance, of shadow. She no longer blames herself for the days she feels fragile. She stops forcing herself to be strong all the time. And that hurts. Hurts like pulling roots from soil they've clung to for years. But only when the roots are bare and anchored can the tree be replanted, where the light can reach. In the darkness, she met her inner child. When a woman walks away from a toxic relationship, she's not just leaving a man behind. She begins to learn how to live alone, but not feel lonely. And one morning, she looks in the mirror and realizes she's not the same woman anymore. She's not trying to be different. That's the moment when a woman has lost interest. She doesn't say it, she shows it. Awakening doesn't come with a thunderclap, nor does it arrive after some dramatic moment. It comes quietly, silently, like the way the sun rises every morning without needing anyone to applaud. The world is alive, and something inside her stirs, a quiet joy that has nothing to do with the approval of others. She feels a lightness in her chest, like a weight that has been lifted. Suddenly, she remembers a time when she used to wake up this way, full of sunshine and smiles. But somewhere along the way, she stopped. It's not a desperate attempt to hold on, but a beautiful opportunity to walk alongside another soul. Two whole individuals making the journey together without clinging to each other, not because she's shut down, but because she's learned how to hold her boundaries. Protect her peace. Know this: you don't need to become someone else. You only need to shed what was never really you. The journey won't be easy or short or ever truly finished, but with every step you take, every pain you overcome, every tear you wipe away, every boundary you hold, every time you choose you are coming home to yourself. You are not broken, you are awakening. And the awakening of a woman will always be a miracle. She loves without losing herself. She gives, but doesn't try to save anyone. She listens, but no longer tolerates what's wrong. She leaves, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. She's learned to let go without regret, to forgive without needing an apology, to begin again, even if the wound still lingers. Somewhere along the way, she forgot what it felt like to just be. Who once screamed in silence has now become the strongest version of herself. Not loud, not arrogant. Her softness has become her strength. She no longer needs armor. She no longer needs to speak much. Her presence is its own declaration. She no longer needs to fight, because she's chosen peace. One day she wakes up, makes a cup of tea, opens the window, and watches the sunlight filter through the leaves. Birds are singing, but the truth is, she hasn't changed. She simply returned to the woman she was always meant to be. She doesn't long for the validation of others or the fleeting dopamine hit of online approval. For the first time in a long while, she is content just being herself. She realizes it's not about having everything she ever wanted. It's about letting go of what she didn't need. She goes about her day in this newfound peace. She doesn't check her phone every few minutes, waiting for a message that may never come. As the days turn into weeks, her transformation becomes more apparent. She no longer seeks love as a lifeline, something to complete her or validate her worth. She no longer hopes for someone to fill the emptiness in her heart, because she has found that she is already whole. She no longer fears loneliness because she understands being alone doesn't mean being lacking. It can be freedom, a homecoming, a cleansing. If someone comes into her life now, it's not because she needs them, but because she chooses to share her journey with them. Her friends notice the change. They see the newfound strength in her eyes, the quiet confidence in her demeanor. Her glow is not an act, a mask to hide behind. It's a radiant expression of her true self. People might say she's changed, but the truth is, she hasn't changed. She's simply returned to her purest essence, a woman who knows who she is, what she wants, and what she's worthy of. She no longer allows herself to be easily broken. That woman who once shattered, who once softened, and if one day the man from her past comes back, sees her glowing more than ever, maybe he'll say, "You've changed." If you are the woman reading these words,